Hello, Robyne.
Hello, Peter, Katz.
And hello to all of you listening. Welcome to another episode of In Time with our dear friend, Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe, and I'm Peter Katz. Robyne, this is a bit of our tradition because as we've talked about, this podcast is not another thing on our to-do list, but it's something that we really want to do. And so we are making time for this because it's something that fills our cup rather than kind of, can be one of the things that we feel we sort of need to do in life sometimes. So, and as we've talked about, we're doing this in the messy cracks and the, last time we spoke, I was in a car on the side of the road. So I'd love to know, where are you, Robyne?
Yeah. So today in the world, Peter, I am in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, at yet again another hotel, getting ready for an event. And I'm so excited to spend time with you today, having this conversation.
Me too, Robyne. Well, I am in my home also in Toronto. And I've been away a lot. I got a flat tire on my way home from our last trip, so that was so. I'm at home. I've just come off producing this event here, this virtual event that I do every year, and and I'm excited because the event that you're at, I'm going to be joining you tomorrow. So we're actually going to be in human form together, which I'm very excited about.
I am also very excited. I'm sorry to hear about the flat tire on your way back from New Jersey, but I'm glad you made it back home safe and sound.
Well, thank you. Well, it was one of those instances, I don't remember where I heard this. I listened to too many podcasts and too many speakers to know. It's interesting, as a songwriter, right? You're writing a new song and you're like, is this me writing this, or is this a song that I've heard? And so I think when you're a speaker or writer, you're also sort of mindful of that. But I know that this is not my thought, but somebody shared the idea. Maybe it was you, Robyne, as I'm going to share this story. You'll be like, actually, Peter, I said that on stage. But the idea that when you get into a car accident, right, and it's just this terrible thing that's happened, but it's well, thank goodness that nobody died. And then, but you can always, and you could just keep drilling down, to the different layers of gratitude, or at least the sort of silver linings to whatever happens. So I was thinking about my flat tire, and I had a 9-hour drive to do, which I obviously was hoping to do in daylight. And this meant that wasn't going to be possible, but I was like, well, I happened to get the flat tire when I noticed the flat tire when I was in the driveway of my dear friend Mark Levy, who I was visiting after the event that I had done, and so he's like, oh, I know a great garage a few kilometers away, although he said miles because he's American, and and so we were able to get the car there, and then his wife came and picked us up, and I just did my meetings from his house and my car, and the guy fixed my car, and it was $25, which I was shocked.
Wow.
I was in my brain, I was like, all right, it's I was waiting for the $200 bill or something. And so I was like, hey, so I did my drive in the dark, but at any other point in those 9 hours, it would have been just exponentially worse. So I really had my flat tire at the optimal time. I got home safely. At the end of the day, it was no big deal. And because I was driving at night, there was no traffic. So there you go.
There you go. I love that. Do you know, it's interesting, Peter. I feel like there's always this pressure we put on ourselves, when we have something inconvenient happen, or even something bigger happen than a flat tire. We sometimes feel this pressure sometimes where it's it could be worse. I should always be grateful. I need to always be, appreciative and see the silver lining. And, it was really interesting. I remember one time hearing about, I'd worked with a group of children, and I had said to the children. We were talking about like some of our favorite quotes and some of our favorite like sayings. And I was trying to get the children to like think about sayings. And this one little boy and I were chatting, and the saying that came up is everything happens for a reason. And he's like, my mother always says everything happens for a reason. And I was like, I said, people like to use that one a lot. And I said, we're meaning makers. Like that's what we do in the human condition is we have to make meaning of things. So we say everything happens for a reason. And I said to the little one, I said, but I just want you to know sometimes things happen that just suck. Like sometimes there is no silver lining. Sometimes there is no meaning or greatest purpose. And I said, sometimes stuff is just not great. And just to give yourself permission, little one, that if something happens that you can't make sense of in your world, like you don't have to always be like, look at the bright side, because sometimes some things don't have a bright side. And do you know what was so remarkable, Peter, is I remember hearing from that little boy's teacher after there was actually like a substantive event that had happened. There was a natural disaster that happened in that area. And I was so overwhelmed by this teacher's response, because she said there they were working with the children, trying to help them like put things in place and like make sense of it. And they were trying to answer really complex, almost like philosophical questions to these children as to why would something like this happen. And this little boy apparently raised his hand and he says to his teacher, well, do you remember that like redhead lady who came in? She says sometimes we don't have to find the meaning in it or appreciate it, because she said sometimes things just suck. And I couldn't believe that this little boy took this moment to be like, you know what, folks, we don't have to try and process this and resolve it, because sometimes some things just suck. And I remember having like my heart felt like the Grinch, and it grew like just that extra sphere, that extra dimension, to think that for that little boy in that moment in time, that he got a little bit of like solstice maybe, or just a little bit of reprieve, Peter, of just not having to try and make sense of it all, that he was allowed just to say that sometimes things just aren't great, and that's okay.
That feels nice to hear that, Robyne.
Oh, my friend.
Yeah. First of all, let me counter strongly that your heart and the Grinch's initial heart resemble nothing at all.
I thank you.
Although the Grinch, clearly his heart had a lot of potential.
Lots of it.
As it grew, whatever the poetry is 3 times that day or whatever. But yeah, there's something about you saying that kind of stops me in my tracks and makes me feel just a bit more human. 'Cause I think I love the expression like life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Like I love that. And I gain a lot of strength and that really helps me in those moments where I feel like hard things are happening and I find it empowering and it gives me a sense of agency, and it does give me, I feel like it's a path of, towards wisdom, right? Versus like bitterness and disempowerment. So all of that is great. And what I appreciate about what you said is the way that I interpret it is like permission to feel. And again, I'm not a sociologist or therapist or psychologist, but what I do know is that when we allow our feelings, then we actually move through them more quickly, right? It's like shining a light in the dark. So there's something about what you just said that makes it just feel okay. And so maybe it's like a companion piece to life is happening for me. It's also yes, and sometimes you just gotta allow yourself to say, hey, that really sucked, or that was really hard, or I wish that hadn't happened, or I wish this had played out differently. So thank you.
100%. Well, you are so very welcome. And again, I think, we put so much pressure on ourselves all the time. And what something I think also happens is like, again, thinking about how time unfolds is that in the moment, in the moment, it might just be something that's just sucks. It might not be okay. And it's something we don't like, and something that maybe we're even trying to like resist happening to us. And we get ourselves kind of stuck there. And maybe something beautiful happens down the road where upon reflection, we can say like, oh, I see how all of this worked in my favor. I see how all of this came together. But those moments, until we connect the dots, some of them, they don't need a good or bad statement or label put on them. It's simply just kind of being curious, almost, instead of being like, oh, this happened for a reason. I'm curious about, I wonder how this is going to unfold in the big picture, right? So meeting it without good or bad, or, you know, even it's interesting because somebody recently asked me like, oh, I shared with them that I did this event. And they're like, did you have a good time? And I'm like, well, time was had. There were parts that were good. There were parts that weren't so good. And I don't know how I want to label all of it about like a good time, because again, I think it just puts so much pressure on us that we feel as though like everything has to fit in these boxes or these categories, either good or bad. And I think the reality is like a lot of it, we need to take the time to actually let some of the dust settle sometimes, to let some of this unfold and some of this kind of work itself out for us to then see the lessons, or see, you know, maybe there's some things that we need to keep working on. And I can share with you, just today, I was talking to someone about this idea that if we repeat what we don't repair. And so if we start to notice things coming up over and over again, then we're able to say, wow, there's maybe some lesson I really should try to be picking up here or learning, because we'll start to see patterns in our behavior. And again, we will totally repeat what we don't repair. And so I think it's this beautiful idea of happening for us, but maybe it's happening for us because there's some lessons that that are waiting to be discovered.
I love that. We repeat what we don't repair. I'm ruminating on the things that I repeat in my life that I think I could stand to do some repair on. And I don't know if you had anywhere you wanted to take us today, Robyne. Did you have a particular place you wanted to take us?
I am totally open to however this unfolds, Peter.
Okay, well, I have a little thread for us to pull on. So in a previous episode, I had asked, and I'll give you this preamble that I'm interested in pulling on this thread because I want to hear your answer, and I also think, just connected to the theme of what we just talked about, I'm curious to pull on the thread to my own answer to the question as well, connected to this idea of repeating what we don't repair. So I had asked you in a previous episode, and it was sort of at the very, very end, my question, my surprise question to you was, if you could sort of go back to your, about half your age, so sort of your early 20s self, what was something that you feel like you knew then that maybe you had forgotten, and you had talked about, you had a longer answer, but you'd said your love of music was one of those things. But I'm reflecting on that question myself in this moment, and I'm also curious where you might have taken that in that moment. And may I give you one invitation, Robyne, as I ask you that question? Of course. I think I've given you this invitation before, but my invitation for you is to really answer that question in this moment right now. Like even just take a breath, take silence if you need it, and just see what emerges for you now as I ask you that question. Because maybe it's even different than what emerged for you when I asked it to you last time.
That's amazing, Peter. Okay. And I'm going to do what you're asking, and I'm going to ask you to repeat the question so I can just hear the question and I can listen without trying to reload. Okay.
Maybe I'll even give you a little visualization here. So, think back to, let's say, Robyne at 21. So where was Robyne at 21 in the world? Like if you were to paint the picture, where were you? Who were you surrounded by?
Yeah, 21, I was living in Kingston, Ontario, and I was also in the process somewhere in that 21-year-oldhood, living in Barbados as an exchange student.
Okay. And so within that time, like obviously at every point in life, we have the wisdom that we have. And, you know, if we look at life as happening, for us, we hopefully gather wisdom as we go and we learn.
Yeah.
And, as things happen, sometimes those bad things, or let's not label them as bad, but those things that happen that just kind of suck or are challenging, or as we grow into our older, wiser brains, maybe sometimes there's things that we forget. But at that time, 21-year-old Robyne, in living in the situation you just described, her reality was her reality, and she knew the things that she knew. And so if you can sort of time travel back to her and think about maybe some of the qualities that she had, some of the things that were important to her, some of the things that she knew to be true at that point in her life. Is there anything from that time and that space that as you sort of revisit her now feels like, oh, she knew something that maybe I could sit at her feet and have her share something with me that could offer me some wisdom, or that I could reconnect with?
Yeah. So one of the things reflecting around Robyne at 21 is there was definitely like a fearlessness that I think I embodied more. Perhaps it was, I didn't know enough at the time, Peter, but there was a fearlessness, yet there was also this confidence in trusting in the future. And I'm thinking back, because when I was 21, that would have been like 4 years into sobriety. So I'd been sober for 4 years. I was back on track. I was at school, and I very much had this like, not this armor in like the traditional, like trying to protect yourself from the big bad world, but I had this like almost this little bit of that sense of invincibility, that I was like forging ahead towards the life I wanted. And it wasn't that I was like, you know, not being mindful or considerate of other people around me, Peter, but I was forging ahead as if it was like, nobody else is going to do it. Nobody's coming to rescue me. I'm just going to do what needs to be done to build my future. And I felt like I was almost doing it in reflection, like almost unapologetically, where it was like, you know what, it's okay that I'm going to look after my needs now. And reflecting on that as a 43-year-old, I remember like, as soon as I became a mother, I realized there was a different dimension of fear that I didn't even know existed in the universe. And it's like all these other things have like unfolded. And with every blessing, there's always another side to it, right? There's that kind of blessing and that curse and good and that pull. And I feel sometimes like I've lost that just that unapologetic, like fight for what I need to. And just that hunger, that hungriness that I think that happens when you're kind of going in that hero's journey about like building your own future, regardless of what's going on around you. And so looking at the wisdom of 21-year-old Robyne, I would love to just have just that little bit of that fearlessness that was like harnessed, of that idea that no one's going to do this for me, that safety is a bit of an illusion, and I am going to forge ahead. And it's not selfish. It's actually how I could best be of service in the world, is if I find my purpose in my way.
So a little bit of fearlessness. Though the words that you said that gave me like these kind of waves of goosebumps were the words "trust in the future." Like that really hit me. And I love, like, part of the magic, I think, of and again, everybody's going to have a different experience in their early 20s, right? We have very, very different circumstances. But like the things that you want to do and be in your life, it makes sense that they haven't worked out yet or whatever, because you haven't, like you're about to try, or you're in the process of trying. And so, you have that sort of beginner's mind, in the sense of like, well, like I remember when I was a musician and I was sleeping on floor and playing to two people, like it made sense to me because I'm like, well, I'm just getting started here. Right. So, when that continued, I mean, it eventually evolved, but like it continued longer than I imagined. Then I had to sort of recommit to the process because it was different than I thought that it was going to play out. So, so I appreciate that, Robyne, and
thank you.
I appreciate, like, I'm going to try to connect two things together. Let's wish me luck. Let's see how this goes. But, like the wording that you used of this, like, I'm going to do this on my own, like that kind of stuff. Like I'm connecting it to the idea of, we were talking about like, yes, it's great that life happens for me and not to me. And there's like there's another dimension to that. And I would say, as I hear you talk about this idea of like, I'm going to do this on my own, like the older, wiser Robyne and probably the older, wiser Peter knows that, well, actually we actually need connection and we do things in partnership and we're, like that would be the sort of wise response to that. And there's an essence to that actually is worthy of being noticed and appreciated and seen as wise as well. So I like kind of holding that sentence without kind of judgment or like, well, no, that's not really the way actually it is. But it's like, no, like there's that spirit that you embodied, I think is worthy of touching base with. So thank you.
Peter, you're welcome. And can I share one moment of this? So when I was about to make a pretty significant career decision not that long ago, I remember feeling so much fear. Like I was so afraid because I was giving up what I'd been told in my culture and in my kind of upbringing that like everybody strives for, that like guaranteed pension, like guaranteed benefits. You can look on a chart somewhere in HR and you're going to know what days you're going to work in 2043. Like your entire future was secured within this like package of tenure and all the things. And I remember being so scared to like walk away because that's what everyone said. That's what security looks like. That's what safety is. And I remember talking to Hunter. And so this was a couple of years ago. And so he was, in that adolescent, he's still in that, later adolescence. And I said to him, I'm taking a big chance by going out on my own and leaving this security. And Hunter looked at me with this big smile and he goes, gosh, that must feel so good. And I'm like, well, actually, there's a lot that goes into it. He goes, no, but Mom, you're betting on you. He's like, you can outwork whoever you have to outwork. You're the hardest worker in the room. Like you're putting all of the chips on you. He's like, that must feel amazing. And Peter, in this moment, I was looking at through the eyes of a 17-year-old thinking, yeah, I love how in the mind of a 17, if my future is going to be up to anyone, I want it to be up to me. Whereas I'd been putting all my sense of security and safety in an HR department that could decide tomorrow I'm replaceable. And so in that moment, I used that wisdom, which I feel like we're brushing up against with me sharing my story of 21. And in this moment, reflecting on Hunter's reaction to me saying, I might do this on my own, and him thinking that's exciting and me thinking it's terrifying, and realizing, wow, where am I putting my sense of safety? And I was putting it in terms of an establishment, an institution, again, where I'm 100% replaceable, versus realizing putting my power within the woman who was willing to do the work. And that was me. And so I just love for me how that reflection unpacked this other experience that really reinforced the fact that, again, it's not that you're not needing other people. It's that you're willing to bet on yourself and you can count on yourself. And that's a powerful feeling.
I love that, Robyne. I love Hunter, and I love his I love his spirit. And what I love about that too is, so as you know, like I do work sometimes more in the facilitation realm, right? And part of one of the design principles, like if you're working with a company, is you want to have like a diagonal slice. Like you want to have the forklift operator and the CEO, and you want to have them sitting next to each other, and it's like equal. In my study, there's all these. I haven't run these particular events, but like facilitation when they're designing a new school, like typically it would just be all the trustees and the principals, but they actually invited 6-year-olds into those meetings, and the 6-year-olds actually are really important stakeholders and have ideas that are super relevant, and that the trustees and the grown-ups that really don't know much about elementary school anymore are not thinking, because they're not the students. And so there's just something that what you're just talking about that there's a real value in kind of that teenagers are so dismissed, right? But I work with teenagers every summer doing this mentoring work, and I think they're wise, and I think that they have all kinds of gifts and perspective and ways of thinking about things that really are just worthy of our curiosity and attention and consideration. And so I appreciate that.
Peter, thank you. And I don't want to monopolize this, because I do want to hear what string you wanted to pull, but to really
keep going.
Take that to like a level up. And I remember I had been teaching in an elementary school in the morning, working with elementary school children. And then I had a health psychology class I was teaching at the university at nighttime. And we were talking about the role of like hope and optimism in like innovation and discovery. Like that was this topic I was talking with my upper university students. And that morning I'd been doing an activity with these little school agers, and I'm like, okay, so what kind of problems do you want to solve when you grow up? Right. So we've shifted the language around from versus saying like, what do you want to do when you grow up, to when you're a bigger person, like what type of problems are you interested in solving? And this one little girl sitting in the class said, you know what, Robyne, I want to solve cancer. I want to find a cure for cancer. And all of her classmates were like, that is such a good idea. Yes, you should do that. And she's like, I'm going to do that. And everyone was like giving her like props and like smiles, and they shared stories about how they've heard of cancer and someone in their family had cancer. And this little energy in this classroom was like, well, she's going to do it. Like she's the one who's going to do it. And that night I was with my university students, and again, talking about like the role of hope and optimism and innovation. And I said, how many people here in this classroom, like, do they, and these were students who were going into the medical community, many of them. I said, how many of you do you think are going to like solve cancer? Like, will you be able to learn about cancer? And they were all like, ooh, not in our lifetime, Robyne. And there was this like, who would be so bold to say that they could cure cancer? Like, and everyone just got into like all of these like norms, right, Peter, about like, whoa, that's a wild idea. Like, no, that we leave that to the smarter people. And like, it was the most bizarre unfolding of the human spirit, where these little ones, and yes, you can bring in like, well, they're little, they don't know better, or maybe they actually do know better. Maybe believing something is possible actually is part of how we find and tap into some of this knowledge and this wisdom and these gifts. And the world kind of maybe takes away some of the edges as we grow up in terms of our curiosity and wonderment. And, one of the things actually a mutual friend of ours, Sean, said recently was that innovation is permissionless. Nobody has to ask permission to be innovative and discover. And imagine if that little one, again, from that elementary school, who held and was recognized by community, that why not her? Why not her be the person to do it? How would that change your trajectory as you go into perhaps the sciences or into anything around active discovery? That just made me think of that.
I love that. I was at an event watching Sean speak this morning, and he was brilliant. Yeah. Everybody go check out Sean Kanungo. Amazing. As you know, my partner works with 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and she would argue day and night that they are the smartest, most wise, fascinating beings on planet Earth. And so there's a spirit there that I think is dismissed at our great loss as a society. And I was also just reminded as you were speaking too, I did a keynote recently for Goodwill Amity, and what they do, everybody knows them as their like the Goodwill stores, but they also do a lot of job placement opportunities, and they do job placement for people with developmental challenges sometimes. And one of the people that I interviewed talked about her son, who has developmental. Is that the correct? What is the correct wording? Is that?
Yeah. The lessons that I've been learned is you always use person first. So it's a person with a disability, a person with a developmental delay, a person with autism. Yeah. So as long as you keep the person first, whatever you say after that, you're respecting the person first.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So her son was a person with a developmental delay, and he had different jobs that he did, and one of them was with the basketball team at McMaster, and he was the water and the towels, and the coach talked about the gifts that he brought that team, and I'm blanking on his name, so let's say his name was John, and the coach said that what was so wonderful about having John there is whether we won or lost, he loved being there. And so like he was just happy to be there. And then he had another job where he worked in like the local TV studio, and he was, providing some support around there, like on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, I heard the story of the manager said, those are my favorite days to go into work because John is there. And I know I could cry. In fact, I am a little bit, but I guess that's a bit of a theme of this episode is, what do we kind of forget as we get all wise and smart? What are those essential underlying things that it's good for us to touch base with again, whether that's fearlessness, whether that's just being happy to be there, whether that's curiosity, whether that's conviction, passion that we're going to cure cancer. I think that's a beautiful thing to touch base on. And I know we're coming up at time, and the beautiful thing is we're going to do many of these episodes so we can pull on future threads another time.
Oh, Peter, that story that you shared with our friend John there, like it just fills my heart when we are able to see the goodness in all things. And I know we started this by saying, some things just aren't okay, and there's not a silver lining in anything. What I'm feeling right now is that when we just pause, right, when we just kind of slow down and are not like hustling and chasing, and we just sometimes just take that little bit of a moment, we can hear and see and discover just under the wonderment that while we're trying to figure out everything and have everything make sense and everything go as planned, we're losing sight of some of those things. And just that invitation to folks who are listening, if you're always looking for a sign like I am, maybe the sign could be just to give yourself that gift of time, just to slow down just for a moment, just to see maybe what you might have not seen had you not slowed down to take that second look.
I love that. I don't know if we're going to break our tradition here of asking each other a surprise question. I guess I gave you a part B to my surprise question. I actually have an amazing question for you, Robyne. But dude, I guess I don't know. I don't want to shortchange it with our limited time here. What do you think?
Oh, I think we should hold it. Let's start there. That's going to be the first thing we'll start with next time.
Okay.
But because to keep the tradition alive, I want to know, I'm going to ask you a question so fast, and it's like rapid response question. Okay. So I want you to, I'm trying to think of the question that's not going to make you feel pressure to give me a really, really big response. If you could have one little delicious treat that when you have it and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the world is a good place again, what would be that one little treat, whether it be a food or a drink? What's that one little thing in front of you that would brighten your day, Peter?
I am a lover of a really great cookie. And as far as I'm concerned, a cookie is not a cookie unless there is chocolate in there. Like some kind of oatmeal chocolate chip, or sometimes a little peanut butter in there cookie, but it's got to have chocolate. Otherwise, I'm sorry, it's not a cookie. So I
love it. I love it. Such a good answer. Vegan chocolate chip cookies. I imagine that's just the top of it for you. That's beautiful.
They're delicious.
Peter, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Robyne. Thank you for your time. And I'm already looking forward to doing this again soon.
You too. Take good care, everyone. We'll hear you again soon.
Thanks so much, everybody.